Kia ora and hello. I have asked my beautiful friend Charlotte to help me because I have been working on a case study here in New Zealand about the misunderstood child. And when I spoke to Charlotte last week, Charlotte was like, wow, this is so different hearing you talk about this rather than what you write in the written word. And it would be really good to capture your journey with this. And it's the very first time that I had worked with Interplay in an early childhood setting. So I also would like to talk about this because I'm still learning this and I'm very intrigued of the journey that's unraveling through actually doing this. This is only the start of something I think that's actually very, very powerful. So with that, Charlotte, I'm going to hand it over for you to be my conductor and keep me on track because I can go off on detours. And let's just see where we go today.
That sounds really great, Donna. What a fantastic opportunity this is for both of us to kind of understand more about where you're going with Interplay. I think we've discussed this before. Um, it's it's such a vital tool, I would say, for understanding not only the child but the adults around them. And for both of us, that's a really, I was going to say hot topic, but it's something that we're both really interested in. Just this idea of what we bring as adults to the 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 places where we interact with children. And I'm really excited to see how this conversation unfolds. So yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, I've read some more of a summary of your case study, and for me it's opened up some really you say that you were finding it hard, not hard maybe, but that there was a difference between your writing and what you were talking about. But I would say that that summary really encapsulated in such a beautiful way the journey that you went on with this team. And I think for me, I think it's interesting, just that idea of, what you feel the talking into will help you, with your understanding too. And where do we start? Where do we start with that conversation? We did talk about, placing the child at the heart of the matter, and I think for me that's essential. Um, and it opens up so many further questions around, it's never going to be just about the child, is it? It's always going to be about the interplay of the child and
Well,
the adults that are working with
you
them.
say that, but it's more in my career as an early childhood teacher. I notice that when there's big behaviors, particularly big physical behaviors,
Uh-huh.
it seems to be this fix the child. This is about the child. And
Right.
I never really hear a lot. I'm starting to hear more about the environment, but I'm not really hearing that much about what the adults bring into the space that is also as again, and this is why Donna Reggio called it, or Donna Berry, who she's now married, um, why she called it interplay, because when we are with children, we're interplaying in the environments with them. And I found this fascinating after coming, and we've both been on this beautiful journey, understanding Pit Club from Budapest. And I think for me, I've been on this quest to try and understand how I can bring this beauty of what I've seen in Budapest into New Zealand. And it's more, and again, there's places that do it really well, but I'm talking about the mainstream. I'm talking about if children are away from their parents, I believe they have to have the very best care because the biology of the child doesn't switch off because they're away from their parents. So the nervous system is still in development. and the attachment security is still in development. And I really wonder how many places put this at the top of what they're doing when it comes to early childhood teaching.
Yes. And I wonder, further, we were chatting about this last week with a group around sort of Pickler's philosophy. The child, when they're away from the family unit, their nervous system is already in that more heightened state. They're never, I can't imagine any childcare provider, any practitioner would say, oh, well, actually, they're so much more relaxed, when they're in we talked about this idea of, sort of being buttoned up, maybe at home, with that freedom that the family, family love and support, and the support that we get from our, our immediate family, especially mums who we've been connected with biologically, physiologically, emotionally, you might be operating at, 100%. Where are we on that percentile kind of gauge when you're in childcare? Are you at 50%? Are you at 70%? You're definitely in I would say perhaps, depending on the quality of the care, you could be, sort of in a pretty good place, but you're never going to be in that total sense of safety and security. And so we're already working with children who are kind of vulnerable. And so, yeah, you're right. We need to create this environment that is conducive to supporting the child's nervous system, but also being mindful of the fact that it's already not going to be as robust as it would be.
And it's really interesting as you're talking, what came to mind as well is that's for some places that I've worked along in my career, sometimes it's actually that early childhood teacher that can create the security for the child that they don't get at home. So
Absolutely.
it's actually backwards and forwards, because and it's no, and again, I'm a really big, for all of us, we've all had journeys, and some people have had bigger journeys than others. But that journey isn't actually who you are, it's what's happened to you. And so
Yeah.
whether that's actually from the parent's perspective, that they've had a big journey, or whether it's from
Yeah.
the teacher's perspective and they've had a big journey, it can affect us. And particularly when
Yeah.
we're with children, what can happen is just the way that children naturally unfolding, it can activate stuff within our own bodies. And I suppose I'm in the beautiful position is that I've done parent infant classes and parent toddler classes here in New Zealand with first of all using Penny Brownley's Dance from the Heart and then my own stuff. But
Uh-huh.
I've also been in early childhood teaching all the way through up to leadership. So I've been able to see from multiple different angles, and
Yeah.
I've been able to see the insecurity that goes on and the nervous system dysregulation that goes on in lots of different areas that the child might experience. And I think that's my thing has always been placing the child at the heart of the matter. But it's then secondary to that, it's how do we support the adults so they can gain security. So again, I think that's a huge thing when and it's really interesting in the group that I'm just working with at the moment. We were talking, we're doing a course on regulation, and
Uh-huh.
one of the mums was like, I've ruined my children. And I'm like, no, 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 you haven't. It's more when we start this journey, it's more what we're doing is that you're learning to reparent yourself
Yeah.
alongside parenting your child. And it's something called gain security. And you end up gaining security by reparenting yourself as the child naturally unfolds. And I think this has been it's been a huge thing for me, not only for, it started off with parents, but then it's also, I've had seen some of the most amazing teachers unfold when I've held them safely to be messy and to unfold and to learn. I know that they really want what we're seeing, but
Yeah,
there's also some, I suppose, some biological steps for them to get through, the way that their nervous system reacts at times of stress, the way
yeah,
that their attachment style is. And when I talk about attachment style, I'm not just talking about the anxious or the avoidant, but I go deeper into how someone communicates because of their attachment style, and how they have boundaries because of their attachment style. And that's actually
yeah,
huge. It's huge when it comes to being with the child. And then we were also talking about how, I know here in New Zealand, I think you were saying in the UK, that we team teach. So suddenly we have
yes,
adults with their nervous systems being with children with their nervous, but not only just one adult and children, but multiple adults and children,
yeah,
all
yeah,
in this beautiful soup of exploration and being together. And
yeah,
for me, I never want anyone to think that they're anything other than where they need to be in this moment, and that in this moment they are good enough.
yeah.
And the whole thing for me is, as long as you have the heart for children, as long as you are placing children at the heart of the matter, then this is an amazing starting place to start off with.
I agree completely. I mean, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about the, this good enough concept. And I think that whenever you're team teaching, my experience of being alongside practitioners is there is just there's there's so much that's coming from that place of feeling not good enough in terms of the way that they want to prove themselves, the wounds that that brings up, and it I've tried, um when I've come to work with a team, to be able to kind of cut through that by saying something along the lines of, I'm coming with no judgment. Um, but that as human beings, we're hardwired to judgment.
Yeah.
There's judgment, isn't there? There's the kind of, oh my goodness, why are you doing that sort of judgment? And then there's the very little judgments that we make every moment of the time that we're alongside people. And I think that really maybe the way, if I could, sort of bring my voice to be able to, really articulate what I mean by that is, I'm coming from a place where I'm not gauging you're good enough, whether you're good enough or not good enough, because um that cuts to the real heart of the matter, I think, Donna. I think and we have that ourselves,
Yeah. So the person will, so again, when I used to listen to my mums, it's more they wanted this beautiful, this conscious way of being with their children. And
uh-huh.
then in every single series that I ever run, we always used to have the conversation about the mother-in-law, about the husband, about
Yeah,
the woman at the play group. We
yeah,
had this out, and and then suddenly this created something inside of the person. It was more, and this judgment that they were actually creating within themselves. So even though someone might not be judging, it's really interesting. Some of us have carried wounds on our journeys where we have been judged with others, and so our natural response or reaction is to actually assume that people are judging us. and and
yes,
and again, we were talking about this, and when we're using this in the context of when we do our case studies in Budapest, and we use the thinking together, about the very first thing after the person's presented is we do the clarifying questions. And I think for me, that's because when someone's talking, you're actually thinking about your own stuff. And so you're actually getting a picture of what you think the person's experienced. And I think this is actually what happens in real life as well. Something happens and we put our own spin on it, where when
Yes.
we get to ask the clarifying questions, we start to change that picture of what we're seeing in our head. And I think it's a really, really clever way to get
Mhm.
everyone onto the same page. Really clever way. So then we can really support the person that's coming with the dilemma. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. As you were talking, I literally wrote down Penny Brownlee, and she always talked about there can be multiple rights. But when I
Yeah.
see people, particularly maybe in teams, I often see that people think there can only be one right. And I find that
That's
really interesting that we're all fighting for that one right. And when we have that one right, suddenly we bring in judgment, suddenly we bring in our own wounds. And it's been really, really interesting for me over this 10-year journey, because what Penny would say is just
yeah.
notice without judgment.
Yeah.
And I would ask anyone, can you really do that? Can you really, hand on
Mm.
heart, can you listen
Mm.
to someone without already making up what you're going to say next? Can you
Yes.
listen to the
Yes.
end of what they've said,
Yeah.
purely listening to them
Yeah.
without either getting activated yourself
Yeah.
or the need to be right?
That's, yeah, I mean, that's fundamental, isn't it, for our life journeys, to be able to be curious, to just get curious about about that person and what they're saying. And you're right. I think we're all really guilty of that, aren't we? Of wanting to um find the the answer, the next part of the conversation. And sometimes that's at the expense of really listening to what that other person's saying. And I think, we're all at different levels, aren't we, you know, of being able to, to enter into a relationship without judgment. And that will come from the fact that, we've all got a different kind of rigidity in our minds. And that I don't know, we're talking about experiences. The experiences that have brought you to where you are, are also completely different. But there could also, I don't know, this is speculation on my part, but there could also be a physiological aspect going on, where people just have, just a sort of greater level of rigidity in terms of, the flexibility of the way that their minds work. And, for some
It,
people, they just can't see someone else's point of view, which comes back to that conversation that we had, I think, last week, where we were talking about compassion and empathy, and how some people just it's very natural. And maybe, like if you were a centre owner or somebody that wanted to implement Pickler, what would the uh, validity of, perhaps asking people to go through like psychometric tests around compassion, to, sort of really hone in onto whether they have that capacity within themselves. I mean, I say this, just to see what your reaction to that is, Donna, really, because I'm not sure.
so years ago, I was actually talking to a teacher that's been around for about 30 years. And back
Uh,
in the day in New Zealand, that's exactly what the kindergarten used to do. So before
really?
it started was you actually went off and you had an assessment. So again, I found that fascinating, and I just want to
Yeah.
come back because I wrote down flexible, and next to flexible I wrote the nervous system, because I think this is what
Yeah.
that resilience actually is. And it's so again, you when you are when you have a large window of tolerance, and I like to work with the window of tolerance, it just seems to be a metaphor that I enjoy working with. But it means that you can come back into that regulated state, so you can go up and come back, and you've got more space to do that. And I think you can be
Can you,
way more.
so, sorry, Donna, before you go on, could you just explain that a little bit better? Because I'm not quite sure that I completely understand the
So
whole
so
concept of the window of tolerance. And
so the window of tolerance, I think it's on the same lines as polyvagal theory. I just
Uh-huh.
learnt about the window of tolerance when I was doing Interplay, and it's
Uh-huh.
it's from Dan Siegel. And
Uh-huh.
so what he's talking about, so he's talking about exactly the same thing about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and how we want to be in more connection rather than protection. But I like it because I literally see this window. I see this window when I'm working with people, and I see that, and I sort of see someone climbing out of the window when they're in fight or flight because I see the sympathetic on the
Okay.
top. And then I see
Yeah.
someone abseil down out of the window when, and I know it's bizarre, but this is the way I see it
Oh,
when they're in the
sounds
parasympathetic,
good.
when they're in the freeze or flop. And so for me, when I'm working, particularly if I'm working with a child that's struggling with what people say explosive behavior, then I
Uh-huh.
actually want to increase their window so they have more space where they're regulated to be. And it's just so again when I'm working with Interplay, that's really what I'm thinking about. My and again, I'll talk about this as we go on, but when I'm in a space, or I suppose what I feel I'm doing as the facilitator is that there's a space, and I think you talk about it in polyvagal, that before you get into that dysregulated, there's like that where you can be dysregulated, but you can still have a sense of yourself. And that's the importance of the window of tolerance, is that you can be in a dysregulated state. So you're not in fight or flight, but you will have got dysregulated, but
Yes.
you're still connected to yourself, which means that you can still think, but you're dysregulated. And so when I'm in an interplay environment, that's exactly where I go with, particularly with children that have huge behaviors, because for them to be heard, they need to be heard at the intensity of what they're feeling inside their bodies. So one of the huge things that Donna Berry um, sort of really, I think really drew me in when I first started working with her was that if trauma has happened in before the first 3 years of life, then there is
Yes.
actually no words to explain that trauma. And so the child will get you to feel. So if they cannot explain, or even if an adult cannot explain what they feel deep inside, they will get you to feel it in your own body. And
Yes.
so when I work in an interplay space, what I have to be myself is I have to be able to hear what's mine. So I have to be in that window of tolerance. So I have to know what's mine and what's other
Yeah.
people's, because we can be in a dysregulated state and I still need to know what's mine, what's my triggers and what's the other person's triggers, what's the child getting me or trying to get me to feel. And it's more, as someone in the case study said, you can talk about interplay, but until you've actually been involved in it, you don't get, it's actually a felt experience. You get to
Mm.
feel the experience,
Yes.
because what's actually happening in that space is between those people in that space. And so it came from play therapy. But
Mhm.
What Donna Berry recognized was that when you do play therapy, it's the therapist and the child. And the parent is usually outside the door, or the teachers aren't involved. And so absolutely that therapist gets the attachment, or that attachment going with the child. But what happens to the attachment circles of all the other people in that child's life? And so this is why Donna went on and moved on to Interplay. So it's very, very similar to a play therapy environment, except for you bring in the people. And so when I did this case study, I brought in there was in some sessions there was two children, in other sessions there was three, and there was always one member of the team.
Yes.
So it might be probably best at this stage to go back and maybe just say how this all came about, that we started
Yes.
with doing this case study.
No, that's
Because
a really
that's
good
been a
starting
beautiful
point.
way of going all the way back. So
Yeah.
it's more, I was in this area, and I was just handing out some leaflets about a free PD that I was happy to do in this area.
Mhm.
And one of these places was to someone that I have known on my Dance with Me in the Heart journey. So, and Dancing with the Heart is what Penny brought back from her experience when she was in Budapest, and she has done so much to change the lives of New Zealand children here. And so this person wasn't there when I arrived, but I left my number and I went to have a look at some other early childhood centres. And I got a phone call to say, I'm back from lunch now if you want to come and have a look around. And I was like, cool, because I'd never actually seen her centre. And
Mhm.
I'd met her when we were both on Dance with Me in the Heart too. And she was just
Mhm.
starting her teaching journey then. And I went and I had a look and I was like, wow. I was like, wow, what have you done? This is amazing. I could see how regulated a space she had created from New Zealand standards. This was an amazing space that she had created and a very thoughtful space that she had created. And there's a lot of work that she's put in to that space. And
Yes.
the atmosphere was so calm. It was that happy hum, that happy hum when children are
Mhm.
actually engaged in
Mhm.
their own play. There's that real, there's a, like a chatter, but you
Mhm.
know that the adults can just be in the environment. They're not needed in the environment.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, whoa, what have you done here? This is amazing. And so
Mhm.
we just sat back to chat. And it was literally minutes before I was meant to leave. And this incident happened with two boys. And it was big and it was loud. And I remember this person turned to me and she literally went, I've done everything that Penny has said, and this still happens. And she'd only been telling me a couple of minutes before how when she'd first taken over being the owner, there was so many big behaviors. And I hadn't seen any up until this point, but suddenly
Yes.
I got her with her hands in her head going, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, so again, I'd been working with Donna Berry for probably a year and a half up to this point, but I'd been working outside of early childhood and I'd been working with parents and their children that had experienced trauma. And I'd actually been going up more in the age range. So I was probably working with more 7 to 9 year olds.
Okay.
And so I was like, do you know what? I've got something I've never tried it in an early childhood centre before. And I said, if you're willing to support me with my supervision, then I can go back and I can ask the founder of Interplay whether she'll supervise me. And I'm happy to come out here and do a case study. I can't guarantee what's going to happen. I can't guarantee what it's going to be like. But I said, if you're willing to trust me, then I'm willing to actually invest the time in this as well. Never imagining the amazing journey I was about to go on.
No.
So I went back to Donna Berry and she was like, cool, okay, well you need to really formalize this case study. And so we'd formalized it that it was going to be I think it was going to be a 6 week case study that beforehand, before I started the interplay, there would be 2 weeks of ABCs. So we would record what behavior was actually happening. And
Mhm.
then before I started, I would go in to do some observations.
Yeah.
And then again, and this case study sort of changed as we went because to start off with what Donna was suggesting was that we did the 40-minute interplay sessions, which are in a separate room. So the only reason I could do it at this center is they had this little block room that had closed doors.
Okay.
So what actually happened is the days that I went, we literally made the block room, we cleared, it was always clear when I got there, and I would bring my suitcase of my interplay objects, which are very different to the loose parts that the centre had. And I have to say, the owner literally looked at me going, what on earth are you bringing that suitcase here for? Because within my suitcase, I had a variety of different, and so I had to be really thoughtful
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what I was going to pack into this suitcase. So initially I used to bring two suitcases because I wasn't sure what to bring. I'm only new in my own career with Interplay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I used to start off, I used to bring two suitcases so I could see where the children, what they needed to talk to me about. But it became very, very clear. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit before I talk about what became very clear. So to start off with what happened, why I gave the ABCs is sometimes when people say the behaviors are happening all the time, it's not until we start recording that we actually start
Yeah.
to see when it's happening. So I always like to start with a baseline. And so what this baseline showed us was that really there were certain times where this behavior was happening. And
Yeah.
then when I came in to do the observations, I could already see that the two children that had been identified in the ABCs, there was a third child as well. And as I did my
Yeah.
observations, I could see this third child was also needed to be part of the interplay because they were always there. But there was also something really interesting that I noticed on my observations was that one of these children circle back to a particular teacher that hadn't been identified as being part of the case study. And as I watched, I could see that there was this real beautiful relationship with this teacher because I could see as this child got dysregulated, this child was circled back to this teacher. And so I asked if this teacher could also be involved in the study. So suddenly this study suddenly got bigger because rather than
Yeah.
working with two children, now I'm working with three children. And rather than working with two teachers, now I'm working with three teachers.
Yes.
But I am so grateful for every little change that we made because it made the study. It would never have been Interplay without all the key people being in the study. And
Yeah.
the child and the teacher were key people. So the first day I was supposed to go, there was some staffing issues. So I'd already turned up because I'd got the phone call late. So I was just saying, well, how about I just get my suitcase out and I see how the children play with it. So it's not an interplay session, but we'll just see how
Yes.
they play. And so
Uh-huh.
I literally just sat back to see how they would play in the room with me.
Mm.
And what started to happen as I could start to see these superheroes and villains play start to happen. And so I took this back. So again, everything that I observed and I dissected with Donna in supervision
Yes.
because it needed the trained eye of Donna to
Yeah.
help me articulate what was actually going on. This study was huge for my own development because Donna was able to show me what I was seeing because I didn't actually understand all of what I was seeing myself at the
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
And so what I was starting to see was something called safety and protection. So I knew that I needed to pack in my suitcase things that would provoke this need for safety and protection. So, and
Uh-huh.
this was the interesting thing as well, because I then had to negotiate, because again, coming from my understanding of Pickler, I also needed to create felt safety for the adults in the room. And so when I mentioned that I was bringing toy guns with me and toy swords, I could see literally that there was some dysregulation going on. I was like, okay, so I had to actually introduce this stuff that I want to bring into my suitcase really carefully. So I didn't.
Mhm.
The first week I came, I didn't bring the anything that would dysregulate the people that were starting this journey with me.
Uh-huh.
And then the first time I brought when I first time I brought the swords in, it was literally I literally went myself because the very first thing, because the boys were like, "What?" And the swords were taken, and suddenly we were there was bashing around the heads, and I'd literally said, and the person in the room with was looking at me because I'd only put in one limit, and the limit was that we didn't hit people over the head
Yes.
with the swords. Well, that was the very first thing that happened. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I had to actually say 3 times to the boys that this was the only thing that I was actually going to put in, and it was a really important limit for me that we didn't hit people around the head with it. But I could see the person in the room looking at me going, well, you're telling them 3 times. When are you going to actually make this boundary firm? But I think with a boundary
Yeah.
as well, it has to be, it's not just a case of it's there, it's in. It was more, I had to just keep reminding them it was there. The
Yes.
amazing thing for me was that when I came back the second week, and I only ever used to bring the swords in the afternoon, and they're
Yeah.
foam swords, they're foam swords,
Mm.
but I
Yeah.
only used to bring them in the afternoon. The second week I arrived, all the boys told me that, hey Donna, we don't hit people around the heads with the swords, do we, Donna? We don't do that. And I was like, look at that. I didn't even have to
Mm.
reintroduce the limit.
No.
I actually could trust them that they wanted to be in
Yeah.
this room with me. They wanted to
Yeah.
be in this room with me. And it was
Yes.
really, really interesting that each of the children, so I was the only constant with the children over these sessions. And so I think
Yeah.
this was the difficult part for the staff team, because if I was working with a parent, the parent would also be the constant with me. But for this staff team, they all took turns in coming in with me.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so that they would all have a session, and then so in the first part of the study, they all had a session, and then we started again. So they all had 2 sessions, but they had it over a number of weeks.
Yeah.
And so I was able to see that the boys were playing the same. Every time I went into the space, they picked up where they left off. And I found it fascinating. And it was
Mhm.
all of this superheroes and villains. And it was quite incredible. So for one child, whenever his nervous system got activated, he would stop the group play and go into play on his own. And I could start to see this every time I went in. It got too big. He couldn't hold it. And so then he would go off and play on his own, and he would stop interacting. He'd be in the space with us, but he'd be interacting on his own. And this went on
Mhm.
for a number of weeks. But this was also on the outside, some of the issues that were going on in the play space, because there was
Yes.
times when he'd get dysregulated. And so what we started to actually see in the early childhood environment was that there was times that he'd get dysregulated and he'd go for singular play, and he didn't want anyone to play with him because he was actually trying to control the play so he could feel safe. And so
Yes.
what Interplay is about is putting language to the unsaid. So once these teachers understood what was happening, suddenly this play that he was doing in the garden was totally different for them. Before, they saw it as combative, that he didn't want anyone to touch it. Suddenly they changed around and they could see it as
Mm.
actually being, oh my goodness, this is how this child, this is his
Yeah.
sanctuary, this is how he needs to be, we need to protect this play for him. And
Mm.
so suddenly the instance started to go down dramatically, even from the first couple of weeks, because
Mm.
suddenly this child was heard. And it was really interesting because we had a break after 3 weeks. We had a break, and so towards the end of the 3 weeks, this child didn't want to really even come into the space. There was nothing
Mm.
really that he needed to tell me. And
Mhm.
so and but this was a really interesting thing as well, because this really activated the adults. Because why is he not coming in? And does he not like Donna? Does he not like the interplay? And so all
Mm.
this stuff was going on. And I have to say, I had a beautiful relationship with the owner. So she was telling me all this stuff. And I was able to actually take all this stuff back into supervision with me. And so what
Yeah.
Donna was actually able to share with me was that children that have no control in their life sometimes actually control. So they might not want to go to things because they actually need to take control of what they can. And
Yes.
so for someone like me that's going, that's actually okay, cool, you don't want to actually come in,
Mhm.
that's fine. But for everyone around me, people see you've got a professional come in to work with a child. Well, she's not good enough, she can't do her job, she does. But rather than seeing that this is probably the first time this child has been given the control to make decisions whether they want to come and join in or not.
Yeah.
And this again reminds me, it's like, even as I'm speaking this reminds me a lot of some of the journey we've had in Pickler and some of the similarities we've had in Pickler about listening to the child's inner knowing of what they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so the
I,
second so Karen, do you want
um,
no, so
no.
the second child made me laugh the whole time, because every time that he came into the Interplay space, he was testing boundaries, and he tested them in the most beautiful, bizarre way, to the point where I was laughing inside. Every time I went into the space, I literally had
Mhm.
to bring my poker face, because I just found it hilarious to see all the
Mm.
different ways he was trying to activate the adults to get a response. And I literally just talked into the unsaid of actually having limits is really important to you. And
Mm.
so again, this is the amazing of this staff team, because what Donna had actually said is that part of the original case study was I was to go out and do Interplay with them in their early childhood environment. But I looked
Mhm.
at these teachers and I saw how competent they were. And
Yeah.
these were reflective practitioners. Everything that we made said in the play space, they took out into the environment. So by the time I came back the next week, they had recognized for this second child that limits were really important. And
Mhm.
actually what this child was actually showing the team, their limits weren't consistent. So the
Yeah.
team actually talked about what were consistent limits, but the
Yeah.
child was actually showing this through their play. And it was a gap in what the staff team were doing. And then for the third child, he was just this beautiful, beautiful, unique, gentle boy.
Mhm.
And he so wanted to play with these two rougher, more energetic children. But his style of play was not the same style of play as theirs. So again, we created the language, and I had to shout across the room a few times, because I could see the terror on his face when he picked up the sword and have a child charging across the room. I'm laughing because it seems so comical,
Mhm.
but it's more, I literally had to shout, if you don't want to play, drop the sword. And he dropped the sword instantaneously.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I supported him to understand, to create friendships and to create play from his own authenticity. Actually,
Mhm.
towards the end of the study, one of the beautiful things is one of these moments when I shouted across the room, if you don't want to play, drop the sword. All three children dropped the swords. And I literally went, oh my goodness, look at, none of them wanted to be playing this sword game, because all three
Mhm.
of them, actually, no, it was two of them dropped the swords at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes as well, we maybe pigeonhole children, because to start off with, they've got this um, energetic nervous system about them, because as these children calmed down, the need for this energetic play diminished.
Yes. Yes. That makes sense.
So we're going to fast forward on to now. Are you okay for time?
Yeah, we're at almost 10 to now, Donna. So we've got about 10 minutes before the end of the hour.
Okay, so what I'll try and do is I'll quickly try and finish with where we got to with the children. So I think I can do it in 10 minutes.
Super.
So after the 2 week break, I came back for another block of three, but things had changed for one of the children. And this was the same child that had been saying that they didn't want to come into the space towards the end,
Yes.
but there was something different when I came. So this first session when I came back, he was on the swing, and he'd already been asked by one of the teachers if he wanted to come in, and he quite happily said, "No, thank you, not today." And
Mhm.
so I went, and I had a try as well, going, "I'm here, if you want to come and join me, come join me anytime." "No, thank you, I'm happy out here." And I'm like, but this was where I could really feel everyone around me. Oh, it's not good enough. She doesn't want to
Yes.
come. What's the whole point of this? And so I took this back to supervision because this one felt different. So although he was saying no thank you, I could feel there was an energy about him, and this one particularly was where he was asserting his control to feel safe. And so he was
Yeah.
saying no to me because, so again, and I think this is a huge thing for people to understand, because a lot of the time when you see people that are exerting power or exerting control, what's actually underneath that is a need to be safe. And we don't look at that. We actually look at it in the negative. We look at it in that there's maybe a parent that's being controlling. But rather than
Yeah.
this parent being controlling, this parent is trying to feel safe. And so, what
Yeah.
is it that they need? Where do we need to attune to them to feel safe? But this was the same thing with this little boy. So I took this back to supervision because I could hear, because in the afternoon I brought my swords, and he came into the session in the afternoon with my swords. And so then I suddenly had, he's only coming in because of the swords. And so I had all this stuff to
Yeah.
take back to supervision with me. And so
Mhm.
Donna was like, "Actually, the staff team's right. He probably is coming back because you've got the swords, but he's
Mhm.
probably coming back as well because the swords are the language that he needs to connect
Mhm.
with you in this moment. And there's nothing in this environment here, on this beautiful regulated environment, that is actually
Yes.
meeting his need for his nervous
Yes.
system."
Yes, you talked about that last week, didn't you? The fact that all of the play items in the early childhood centre were very kind of soft, all these lovely loose parts, but they weren't actually a conduit to, his expression maybe, or
And I think that's a sensible thing. I think that's a sensible
Mm.
thing, because when you've
Yeah.
got 30 children in a space together, then
Yes.
how do you hold the safety if we're not
Mm.
looking? So again,
No,
teachers
I
are
agree.
taught to
Mm.
regulate. That's what we're taught to do. In
Yeah.
interplay, it's slightly different in that
Yeah.
I attune to the nervous system. It's
Yeah.
slightly different. So which is why interplay, we can do parts of it, but the parts where I bring in the swords and all the rest of it really need that separate space, because
Yes.
otherwise we could actually get that dysregulated space going on in the early childhood centre. So I think there's a
Oh, I
place for
agree.
one bit, but
Yeah.
for these particular three children, there was a need for something else. There was a
Yes.
need for a different space, and that's all it was, a need for a different space and to
Mhm.
have a different conversation. And I was
Yeah.
still having a conversation through play, but it was with different play objects. And so this session after the break, I didn't really know, because I didn't really have a chance to talk to any of the teachers. So I literally went in, because part of interplay is that you're in the moment, you're working, and you're
Yeah.
tuning to what you're feeling within your body. And I only really started talking to the teachers lately, that session after the holidays. You don't, so part of my role is the interplay. As long as everyone is safe, I let the play keep going. So in another childcare centre, we might not, because we've got so many children, but in the
That's fine.
interplay space, I don't stop the play.
Yes.
But this particular session, I was feeling scared, because this
Mhm.
is what this little boy wanted me to feel. And the
Yes.
play, so this jail that they create, is a truck that has a flip down lid, but it became the jail. All three boys identified it as the jail, and this is why when in an interplay we have things that can have multi uses as well, just like the loose parts can have multi uses. In the interplay suitcase, we also have multi uses.
Yes.
So he started on this safety and protection, the villains and the heroes, and the villains had to go into this jail, and he was crashing it around, and it was crashing, and the play was getting bigger and bigger. And I remember saying to him, you don't need to show me anymore. I feel in my body feels scared. I feel how you feel inside. And still it was crashing and crashing. I was like, whoa, he has a lot to attune with me. And I was starting to get nervous of how big this play was going to get.
Yes.
One of the things that Donna had actually um highlighted to me was that this play that he had with the safety and protection, he always did on his own, and it was about him probably being the protector and keeping his environment safe. So he
Yeah.
always did the rounding up of the villains and putting them into jail and putting the. So Donna had literally said, if I found a moment where I could join in with the play, to look
Yeah.
for that moment, that session, he let me join in. I literally said, oh my goodness, this is such hard work. Look at all the work you're doing with all of these bad guys. You must be exhausted. Let me help you. How
Mm.
about I just hold the lid of the jail, and when you've got all the baddies in, you tell me when and I'll flip the lid up,
Mm.
which is exactly what I did. And
Yeah.
he let me play. He let an
Mm.
adult help him create safety. That was how huge that moment
Mm.
was.
That was super
And
powerful.
so then the play still carried on, and I'm still going, I hear you, I hear how scary this is, because I'm feeling scared inside. And then he caught his finger and he cried. He cried.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm here, I've got you. And he came onto my lap and he bawled his eyes out on my lap. And I'm like, I've got you. I know how hard this was. I can feel it. You've been showing me all session. This is so tough, and I've got you.
Mm.
It was huge. I didn't actually realize how huge this was until I talked to the owner after the session.
Yes.
And again, this owner, she spotted things, and both of us didn't know the things that she spotted, but she gave me such great material to go back to Donna with. So he went out after the session, and because he'd been in quite an active state within the session, he went straight to the swings and all the self-reg places in the early child environment to regulate himself. And he slipped, I think, on a slippery piece of the garden.
Yeah.
And what the owner said to me is that he doesn't normally cry. He has these crocodile tears, but he cried real tears today. And
Mm.
you could see she was perplexed. And I didn't
Mm.
know what I was hearing, but I took it back to Donna. And so,
Yes.
what Donna literally, when I explained to what had happened in the space and what had happened in the early childhood centre, Donna was like, he actually feels safe to let out his true emotions. And so,
Yeah.
what happened, because you were able to attune to him in the interplay space, he felt it was safe to let his inner world
Mm.
out. It was
Yes.
huge. That session was huge. And when I
Mm.
spoke to the teacher that was in that session with me, what she had actually said was there hadn't been any behaviors, but she said they had felt like there had been an undercurrent going on all week.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling like something's going to happen, but nothing
Uh-huh.
did. But
Yes.
literally, when we got into that session, and when we had the play items where he could literally attune his nervous system to that what he was feeling, this is where we got to. And he got to get into a space where I could attune with him of actually how crappy it felt in his body.
Mm.
And that was huge. And so then
Yeah.
the next session, he comes back, and the play starts again. And so this time I'm like, okay. So I jumped in earlier with seeing if I could actually help, which he let me. So actually someone helping. So then I literally tried again I could see that his teacher was watching. Could she join in? He let her
Mm.
join in. Then his little mate who was in the room with him, I said, he's watching, he's concerned. I think he wants to help you with some of the work. And he let him join in. And
Mm.
then I think we all got a little bit cocky. And he literally had a moment. He literally, you could see he got dysregulated. And I was like,
Yes.
whoa, okay, we've actually overstepped the mark. We've overstepped his ability to feel safe.
Mm.
Now,
Mm.
this would have been the point in the past where he would have left the play and gone off and done something on his own. But he
Yes.
managed to stay with us, and I managed to get the words out. Oh, we've overstepped. We've actually taken over. We didn't mean to take over, and we've taken away your safety. And I said, we will all stand back. Tell us what we need to do. You
Yeah.
direct how we can play.
Yeah.
And he directed, and we went through him directing how we could all help. This is the magical part, Charlotte, is as
Mm.
soon as we had all done that and everyone had helped him, he put down the truck, he went to look to the suitcase, and he got out this puppy, this little soft
Wow.
puppy I have
Mm.
in my suitcase. And this little puppy was scared. And this little
Mm.
puppy had to find a hiding place. And this little
Mm.
puppy didn't like the noise of the room. And this little puppy was so afraid of so many things. I believe that he was actually showing me what it felt like to be him. And it was the
Yeah.
puppy was a representation of who he was.
Yeah.
Now, this play replicated for the remaining sessions. So the remaining sessions for this child, we had the jail, and everyone helped
Mm.
him with the jail. As soon as everyone
Mhm.
had helped from the jail got discarded and the puppy came out. And we had this
Mm.
really beautiful, nurturing play. There was one
Mm.
session with the other little boy that, and what I noticed with this other little boy that likes the limits was that he's actually not very good at expressing when he feels a boundary has been overstepped for himself. So the
Right.
puppy landed on this little boy's head, and
Okay.
I could see the tension in. So I literally put the words to
Mm.
the situation. I don't think this child appreciates the puppy landing on his head, which
Mm.
also gave a shock, which gave a shock to the little boy with the puppy. But
Mm.
the magical thing is I'd found these tiny, tiny little puppies in a secondhand shop at the weekend.
Mhm.
And so literally what he did was he then took his puppy and you could see this play with these little tiny puppies, which I believe was a representation of the younger children that had been the
Yes.
chaos for him in the room. And he had
Yes.
this really beautiful nurturing play that happened between the big puppy and the tiny puppies.
Yes.
Honestly, it's more. I'm watching this going, how can the play only a cup about a week beforehand have been so violent to
Mhm.
now we've got to this nurturing play. Honestly, even
Mhm.
I didn't understand what was happening, how amazing this play was.
Mm.
And this was only his journey. We've still got the other two boys' journeys in the room. What I would say about the second child that likes the limits was I really wish that I'd taken pictures myself of this child, because the child that I first saw at the start of the study,
Yes.
there was like a about him. By the
Yes.
end of the study, there was this child was so gentle. This
Mm.
child was
Mhm.
like all these children, they changed in appearance with their nervous
Yes.
systems.
You see that. Mhm.
Oh,
I've
and it
seen
was
it.
so incredible to watch.
Yeah.
And for this second child, he had to me the most dramatic change in his appearance, to the point that I didn't
Mm.
even recognize him from the child
Recognize.
that started the study.
Mm. Mhm.
And then
Wow.
from the third child, he literally started actually playing how he wanted to play in the room.
Yes.
He suddenly found this real actually okay to be me. So even though I was working with three children, they all had three different journeys in this room.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
really interesting thing was there was a session where the first little boy didn't come in, and one of the teachers couldn't come in because of ratios. And so I said, well, I'll just take the other two children in with me.
Yeah.
And I watched for the whole session, these two boys recreated child one's play. And I could see the
Oh,
confusion on their face because they got the truck and they were bashing it. And they were looking at me because they were like, I don't get what all this, because it wasn't their
mm-hmm.
play. But also,
Wasn't
when
there?
he wasn't there,
Yes.
they literally played like he did. And I think to try and understand
Mm.
what was going on inside his body and actually so they could replicate it in theirs. But you could see the confusion on their faces. So with
Yeah.
that, Charlotte, this is really interesting because I've actually got to the end of the children's journey with
Yes.
Interplay,
Yes. I
which
was thinking
allows
that.
me to actually talk about the teacher's journey next time that we
Yes.
talk. Do you have any
Yes. I think
questions
that's.
before we finish?
No, I think there were so many things. I've written quite a lot of notes. There were so many things that resonated with me. I think yeah, it's such an incredible journey that you've been on. And I think I was thinking exactly the same thing. We were coming to the end of our time, but you managed to kind of encapsulate everything to do with the children in this session. And what we need to do next time is to, because I know that you've got so much that you can talk about in terms of the teachers' journeys, we should dedicate a whole hour to that as well if we can. So yes, thank you so much. It's been
Not,
so
and
so
as I
interesting.
just want to say that there's a place for both. And it's really
Mm,
important because I know the owner of the centre really wanted to reiterate that she doesn't want what's in my suitcase in her play space. And I totally agree with her. I think there's a time and a place for both experiences. And to be perfectly honest, it only needed a couple of weeks for the children's nervous systems to regulate for what they had in the centre to be enough.
Isn't it incredible when you think about it? You know, when you think about um our journeys to well-being, you kind of imagine that it has to be some sort of long and arduous road, but how quickly for children, they can show us how adaptable they can be. It's kind of mind-blowing, really.
And I think just like adults, children want to be seen and to be heard. And
Yes.
this is what my suitcase offered these three particular
Mm.
children was
Yeah.
it was the chance for them to be seen. And I think this is my passion, is that these children are often their behaviors. Everyone's, there's a big buzzword at the moment about polyvagal and regulation, all the rest of it. But how many people forget about that as soon as we see big behaviors? And
Mm.
how many people forget this play or this behavior we're seeing is dysregulated play, but
Yes.
it so
Yes.
quickly gets forgotten.
Yes, yes, you're right. It's almost as though you want to just put it all in a box, and if it doesn't fit in the box, then you've got no. We were talking about it earlier, weren't we, about the hands, the pickler hands, and how, and when everything's going smoothly, you can really concentrate on, making sure that your hands are really gentle, and then the moments where there's some big regulation, you're having to really bring a lot from within yourself to be able to, you know, have any sort of even thought towards your hands. And it's because we're all activated, aren't we? And it's, yeah. And the other thing that I was thinking about what you said was, you know, I had last week a feeling around this sort of stepping into this regulation of the child. And I spoke to you about it, I think, how exhausted I was afterwards. Um, and how, for you, having that supervision with Donna is kind of a fundamental component.
You
But
couldn't
for us,
do this work. You couldn't do it without supervision.
that's, but for caregivers, childcare practitioners, we're here, and we want to be able to be, emotionally present alongside children, but those systems are not in place really in a childcare setting, are they? And I suppose maybe possibly, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but kind of, you know, when you think about the in at Pickler House, when they have those talking about, thinking alongside each other, talking about the children, sessions at the you know, in the afternoon, how those would be a peer sort of supervision in a way, and something at least to be able to help the adult to kind of diffuse.
And yeah, and as you were talking, because again, I think this is huge. So again, here in New Zealand, even just to have planning meetings or staff
Yeah,
meetings, it's
yeah,
huge. You know,
yeah,
it's more, and I think there's I think for both of us, I think we're both on this inquiry
yeah,
of the similarities and the differences between our respective countries and what happens in Budapest, because I think there's a lot of answers in there. There's a lot of answers for us because yeah, I know in New Zealand the centre that I did this interplay is what's classed as a small centre,
yes.
and that is double the size, if not more, than what the Pickler House is.
Yeah, yeah. And do they have those meetings, Donna? Do they find the time during the day to have those kind of alongside meetings between
So
practitioners?
daycares go. I think this one goes from 7:30 to 5:30,
Mm,
and there is not. And so again, the children are from 6 months to
yeah.
maybe six,
Uh-huh.
and there's not the time in the day where
No,
anything stops. It's
no,
so it's more. This is one of those ones where it is a difference. And
yeah,
I think this is just the thing of where, because you start where you can
yeah.
and you place the child at the heart of the matter,
Uh-huh.
but you create what your environment, what your, again, even the legal implications that we have here with our licensing here in New Zealand is that
Yeah,
we have to have certain teachers in certain environments by licensing requirements,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is different to what I've observed in the Pickler House.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there's so much to pull back the layers of,
Mm-hmm.
and also it might be, I believe, for myself in New Zealand, that it's not about diluting what Pickler is, because I think that it shouldn't be diluted, but it's also looking at what needs to be alongside it to make it
Yeah,
work in
yeah,
particularly for me in New Zealand.
yes, yes.
And it
No,
might
that
be for you, it's looking at a different kind of peer
mm,
support or peer supervision. I know that working with the level of behaviors that I work with, there is no way that I would do this without
no,
supervision,
no, no.
because I have to analyze myself, and I have,
Yes.
and it's more, and I will come on to this next time, but I've had, I think, probably 3 supervisions over one small thing that happened
Mm,
in one of the sessions to look at
yeah,
it from multiple angles.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
how deep we go in our
yes.
supervision.
Yes. And I suppose, you know, maybe a good way to sort of sum up this discussion today, I don't know, is you say that, and what you saw was these big behaviours in a setting that was by New Zealand standards seen as quite small and Pickler inspired. So, you know, very thoughtful and a very sort of you know, clearly thought out environment for the children, these big behaviors. What about those children in big busy centres
Yeah.
and caregivers, practitioners that don't have this insight, you know,
Yes.
going home at the end of the day feeling really frazzled, and you know, where do we begin to start, you know, to be able to help to put some support in
Yeah.
there? I
So
think
so
that's
so again, I
the
just
ultimate
want to,
question.
this centre, amazing centre, I would
Mm,
say, hugely thought out, has an amazing owner,
Yeah.
has thought about so many different things, placing children at the heart of the matter. A staff team that are reflective practitioners. You know, it's
Yes.
more, when I did this study, I don't think I could have done this study in any other centre in New Zealand apart from this
No.
centre. This centre had already taken away so much of the stress and the dysregulation that it just left me with the conversation that I needed to have with these three boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a quite
Really
incredible
interesting.
centre, but I,
Yeah.
I want to keep it anonymous because I feel that's really important. Although I want to
Of
shout from the
course.
rooftops who they are.
Of course you do. Of course you do, Donna. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for giving us all that insight into the incredible work that you do.
Thank you, Charlotte, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, me too.
There you go.